So today's guest is Erin Baute, and she has been somebody that's been studying and working in the field of behavior change for over 20 years. She is currently finishing her PhD in industrial and organizational psychology with a focus on coaching and development. She's spent time throughout her career honing her skills in behavior change, consciousness, self-awareness, emotional intelligence, communication strategy, relationship management, and it's very practiced at integrating the Enneagram model to help individuals in both life and work. So, Erin, thank you very much for coming here. This is definitely right up the alley of what Up Level Mind is all about. So, how are you doing today?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. I mean, it's always exciting when I have somebody that, comes on with like such a long list of all of the good stuff that they know, right? And yet there's still something that is coming up that's kind of a wrench in moving forward in the way they want to move forward. So I'm always kind of fond of that whole bit of like welcome to Team Human, right? It's so little about what we know, but it's kind of like what we're embodying and what in totality is showing up. So I'd love for you to dive into more on like who you are, what you do, how you got to doing it. Break that down for us.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I've been working in behavior change for a long time, and I've focused the majority of my career in leadership development. I worked for private organizations, helping to build internal teams, and I really, really loved the work. I loved the high energy of the corporate environment, and it wasn't until I became a parent that I really recognized that what I knew, like in here, wasn't the same things as what in here. And they sort of just really took the rug underneath me. My oldest daughter, who is 7 now, but at the time was 2, was diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And it sort of rattled everything I knew about parenting and predictability and control and all the things that just you really recognize when there are other humans around. You have no control over. And I really, really had to rumble with my work, the things that I had gotten really competent about. She made me practice them and really integrate that work. And through the course of parenting, I ended up leaving my corporate job. It got too hard to be a parent of a high needs child and another growing kiddo and strive at that level. And through all of that work, I went back and got my PhD. I often say it's some of the biggest mistake I made around my ego that I ever have. I thought, and I'm sure this will come up as we talk, I thought like I wasn't going to be good enough to get another job, like this gap, all of these things. I better continue to like be smarter, And so I'm 4 years into that. I'm working on my dissertation. And what I've sort of recognized in hindsight is how little I actually knew, even though I do have a litany of expertise. There was still so much yet to sort of integrate. And so I'm at this precipice of a coaching career and kids growing and finishing a PhD where I feel really new. It just feels all new. So that's kind of my wobbly journey here.
Yeah, I mean, I think every journey is wobbly. Definitely the ones that are make for interesting stories are more wobbler than others, if that is a word, wobblier. But thank you for sharing that. And I think it's a beautiful example of taking this kind of roundabout way to get to where you are at. I think the self-awareness that you bring to the overall story is palpable even from the like short little bit that you've shared. So I'd love for you to dive more into like your business and what is it that you're doing right now? What is the type of coaching that you're doing? Break that down for us.
Yeah, so because I'm a behaviorist in behavior change, I'm interested in helping people get from one side of a behavior or habit to the other. Often I have done that in leadership development, right? How do we sort of build great teams? And they start from sort of these habit shifts, and leadership is a habit. And I use the Enneagram, which is a personality profile, to help put language to the patterns that might have been created underneath those habits, as a way to maybe like hack our way through it, or find some meaning in it, or find tools or resources that might work, in alignment with somebody a little bit differently. Make it more human, more personable. That, not every shirt feels good on every person, kind of thing. And so ultimately, my work is to help leaders, sort of get connected to that part of themselves, and to build these really strong habits as we move through.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I've heard of it before. I know I've taken the test before, and I can't actually tell you what my numbers are off the top of my head. But I'm a big fan of them. Like I've actually gotten a lot of value through doing different types of personality tests throughout, my career, and even the whole behavior bit that you speak about. So I don't know if you know about a little bit background my story, but I owned a brick and mortar weight loss center for 10 years. And a lot of our work was around behavior change, the lifestyle aspect, really closing the gap between like giving a technical recommendation in that instance about the nutrition and like lifestyle, and then the gap that happens between the client actually following it, right? So I dove quite a lot into that world. So I'm always happy to see when like people come from, you're in a different space, but at least with the same sentiment. So
we speak the same language.
100%, right? And I loved what you said about like leadership is actually like a learned behavior. Like it's not this magical trait that you're born with. It's something you can cultivate and build. And I fully agree with that sentiment as well. So I'd love to then dive into like, what are the business problems that are showing up for you right now?
Me? I recognize that they come from me, and what I do with that, I have no idea, right? But this self-doubt, the tenderness, in all of the healing work that you do in self-awareness and consciousness, and then obviously like parenting, and then special needs parenting and all of that, it sort of took away all of those old defense mechanisms. And the way I sort of describe it is, it's like kind of cracked me open. And I love that. I love the groundedness and the tenderness. And yet it also means that I don't have the same capacity to sort of tuck it all back in and hit the business part, the sort of churn and burn of asking enough people, and taking the rejection and moving on. Like logically, all of that feels really, really clear to me, but there is a hesitation from me to move forward, because I know I'm going to have to like move through the sort of muck of all of these feelings that I might have been better at fluffing off before. So I see that limiting me in my asks, in believing in my work. I mean, I believe in my work, right? Like if you sit next to me and I'll convince you that I believe in my work, and I sort of let that quote unquote sell because of the tenderness around, making the ask and the self-doubt, and I'm sure all very normal things. I just don't know how to like force myself through it anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100% it does. And again, going back to the whole self-awareness bit, right? Like that's really keen. And it's usually the opposite. Like usually it's the business problems that I can then reflect back in how you just described, but you're already like jumping to that, right? So I think
I just have no idea what to do.
No, it's perfect. I just actually, it was more to acknowledge you for like, you can see the patterns. You're very good at like spotting it. So now it's just a matter of diving deeper into them. So you had asked, or you mentioned a bunch of times about like limiting my asks for, and then it wasn't kind of finished. So I'm assuming like it's limiting, like basically like you're limiting the asks for the sale, like to actually do the coaching with you. Is that accurate?
Yeah, or even just creating the opportunity to even ask in the first place, right? Like I think I just cut my nose off to spite my face, like all the way back here.
Got it. So I'm not even kind of putting myself out there so that the possibilities to even have the asks are actually present.
Yes. And then, I've been sort of safe and insulated because I, when I do have the opportunity to work and do really good work, right? I have this really deep, rich referral network, but your business only goes so far from this, small community that you have. And so I'm just not even getting outside of that. It's so safe.
Right. Because the people that know you, they trust you. So there's no like chance of being rejected or anything like that.
I
Right.
mean, he's good.
Yeah. Got it. So if we can then just take a step back away from, let's just say, the comfort zone of self-awareness. And because the original question was like, okay, well, what are you seeing as problems in your business? Right. And you kind of went into, well, these are the me problems. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could articulate more the actual like business problems, like from the outside looking in, it seems like, okay, I'm not generating even like the conversations, like the prospect conversations. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
obviously making enough sales, but like you elaborated in your own words.
Yeah, it looks like inconsistency. Like I always make just enough, right? Like, and so my goals that I set is just enough, and I always make just enough, and I'm doing it consistently, but it's never like sort of above and beyond that. And so I'm not seeing the growth that would probably match the time and effort and expertise that I'm putting into it. Um, and not sort of, I think, going big with it in any way.
Okay. So in that case, when you're saying inconsistent, meaning like inconsistent in terms of revenue
Yes. Yeah.
coming
Yeah.
in? Okay.
Yeah.
And is it inconsistent in term, like, is it kind of like the feast and famine? Like one month is really high, one month is really low, or it's just consistently, I have enough to survive, but never really to thrive?
I'd say 80% of the time it's the consistency. I have just enough. And then occasionally I'll have these, blow out of the water experiences where I'm like, where did that come from?
Got it. So then how would you define inconsistent? Because if it's like consistently I'm surviving but not thriving, and then every so often I get this blip, is that what you mean by inconsistency or something
Yes.
else?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Not having inconsistent growth. I have consistently enough. How's
Got it.
that?
So consistently enough, but very consistent in growth, which kind of means it's random. It's not really generated by you, right? It's something,
Yes,
whatever happens, and then cool, but it's circumstantial. It's not
that's
generated by you.
exactly it. That's
Okay,
exactly it.
got it. Okay, so no growth. Okay, and then you also mentioned there's just like time and effort that I put into it doesn't really reflect the revenue that I see. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, so another, I think, fatal flaw is I have a tendency to fill my time up pretty well. And so in that, I can always, make myself busy. I can always work, right? Like you sort of get conditioned in a corporate environment of you fill 50, 55, 60 hours worth of work a week, and you figure it out. I still have that ability to do that without the discernment around, is this actually revenue generating or adding value or a benefit? So those muscles are really primed. They're not asking good questions.
So it's like you're doing a lot, but a lot has nothing to do with actually like income producing activities.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, got it. And then that's what's causing the lack of growth, the time and effort I spent not actually getting me closer to anything that I actually want. That's the inconsistent growth. And then that level of activity actually produces the minimal results that I do get.
Sure. Yeah.
Got it. So if you were to zoom out a little bit, how does this actually affect you more day to day, like in your life?
I definitely feel this, it's personal and professional for me because I feel full, right? I feel busy and I don't feel relief. I don't feel like there's a finish line. I don't feel like there's breaks, which I know that's all not true. That's just sort of the striving mentality of endless work. And then it makes it hard to transition back home where I have capacity left for kids and life and husband and family, you know? And so I have to be really intentional about releasing and making sure I don't let things live on other people that don't belong to them. But I don't always have the capacity to be that thoughtful. And I don't really like the spillover that happens when I'm not.
Got it. So this monster hamster wheel that you have to keep going that produces minimal results is also then seeping into the family life because it's exhausting all of your capacity to keep maintaining something that has very little output.
Right.
Is that accurate? Okay.
Yes.
And how does that make you feel?
Well, like crap, really.
Yeah. And why?
Well, you know, I think it sort of perpetuates that not good enough when, of course, I'm not good enough if I never finish anything or if I never, you know, it's that like self-doubt and tugging on that tenderness again. It feels sort of cyclical, but maybe the wrong way of the cycle. I want to go the other way.
Yeah. Right. So I'm not good enough because I don't finish everything. So I got to work more to actually finish everything. But then I'm not good enough because I'm spending so much time working and it's not producing the results that I'm also not good enough because I'm not like I'm too drained to have the capacity for the things that actually matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a very heavy cyclical bit as far as like how this all seeps and interconnects together. So in that case, you had mentioned self-doubt quite a bit throughout this. So what is it that you actually doubt?
Oh man, when I really think about it, I don't doubt my competence. I feel very comfortable with what I know after so many years of practicing it. I think I doubt it's not worth. That's not the right thing. I don't know if it doesn't feel like inherent to me, but it feels like good enough. I don't doubt that it's good enough or that there's enough other really good things out there that it's not competitive enough or it doesn't stand out or it's not different or special. Maybe it's somewhere in that because it always feels in comparison to something else. When I get still and I think just about me, I can find sort of my wholeness. It's just the rumbling in the world where I start to feel that doubt. Does that even remotely make sense?
Sure. So the doubt isn't in your competence to deliver on something that somebody agrees they want delivery on. You can execute and deliver because you've created the evidence of that in the past. It ends up happening in terms of you going out into the world without the safety net of somebody agreeing that they agree with who you are. So the doubt is in the uniqueness of what it is that you do.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. So what resonates about that?
Just it's the lack of the yes. It's the lack of the probably reassurance or commitment or sort of recognition, the sort of seen human quality of like, I see you, it's good, you're good. That's what the yes sort of gives me is this mutual understanding. And then I can sort of show up confident that I know how to deliver. But in the unknown of are they accepting or rejecting me, I doubt my abilities. Like I just recognize that I sort of externalize my competence based on their yes.
Yeah, I would say it's again a very good observation, and that's what I was picking up too. I would articulate it and you can let me know if this lands, more as unless I have the external yes, like my confidence is conditional on the external yes, right? Like if somebody says, yes, you are good enough by virtue of me wanting you to do this work, okay, now I have full permission to shine and do my thing. But if it's me standing in my own power in the world, saying the exact same thing, that is absolutely a no-go.
Yeah, it's greatly diminished. Can I swear on this?
Absolutely.
I feel compelled to say some swear words.
Make this as a pirate of a podcast as you like. So feel free to let out whatever comes in.
Yeah, that's
So,
it.
yeah. So in that case, needing the external yes, do you see how that perpetuates the activity to always be busy, but never really do the income producing activity to step outside of your comfort zone of your referral network and actually execute on reaching out to more people who could potentially say no?
Right. Yeah, totally. It feels crystal clear, right? Like the window just got cleaned. I still am in that place where I'm like, well, I don't know what to do with that, right? Like, you've plugged a lot of things in.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do I do with that is a pretty big question, right? Because it's going to go into, because this is very stereotypical. And I certainly had this pattern as well. And a lot of my clients do, where for those of us that excel intellectually, we got good grades in school, we, excelled when the structure was around us. We tend to derail whenever that structure is either removed and or the expectation is now for us to set those same standards, right? Somebody who has a PhD has all of the experience that you have, kills it in a corporate environment.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
Within the confines of that, you are a ninja, right? But as soon as that is removed, now, like, I feel naked and I don't have the permission to actually excel in what I can do. So as long as the external, yes, the external standards are set for you, then you can perform. Going into business for yourself and making that transition, nobody's going to do that other than yourself. And I think this is now the part of business that has really triggered all of the unaddressed problems that are likely going to lead to, visibility, probably like, am I a good girl if I do this, or that? Like, what are the confines and the rules within which I can show up? Where do I get my worthiness from? Like, we can dive into all those, but like that, like in a generality, right? I don't know which ones resonate with you or not, but that generally are kind of the patterns that I see. So what is coming up for you as I share that?
Well, I think you nail it, right? Sort of the confines of structure, which I've always been in school or corporate, which I've done really well. I mean, you call me a ninja, I've literally been called that before. And so you lift that all out, and here it's just me, this tender sort of like, bare being. And yeah, of course, I find myself going back to old patterns to sort of protect that, shield it in any way possible. And in that, in and of itself, it is limiting me, because when I feel comfortable about the product that I'm putting out or the service that I'm doing, that goes away and I can get in front of it, but it takes a thing. And I'm recognizing, as you tie this all together beautifully and lead me right there, is that it's figuring out that same confidence around me and not the thing will hopefully help me get out in front with that same sort of riskiness that I don't care, because I feel so good about this thing that if you say no, it's fine. It's not for you, because I do believe in it, but I don't have that same conviction around me.
Correct. Because you've spend so much of your time running away from ever having any conviction for yourself,
Yeah.
right? If I stay within, like, and you said at the beginning of this whole thing, right? I went into this PhD program thinking I needed it to actually, like, and it's like, but I actually didn't, right?
Mhm.
So, like, imagine the amount of energy, time, money,
Mhm.
resources spent towards getting something that is very impressive. Like, let's not, downplay it in any way,
I get you.
but it's like how much of like yourself went into proving from the outside something that if you had spent the same amount of time, money, and effort like nurturing in
Mhm.
yourself, you could have also got. But
Yeah.
now you're at the end of your PhD journey, only to be left with the fact that, well, this wasn't the solution to my real problem, which
Mhm.
was I am missing the conviction of self, and
Mhm.
I matter less than the external standards set to me by these three letters.
Mhm. Yeah, that feels very, very clear.
Yeah. So I think that is going to be a big piece of the overall puzzle for you solving the
Mhm.
business problems that are in front of you. And I think the other part that you kind of alluded to, this whole, there's like this narrative that like tenderness and
Mhm.
business have a hard time coexisting.
Mhm.
Like if I am tender, then that goes against the like gritty, cold nature that I need to
Mhm.
succeed in business.
Mhm.
So I'm curious what comes up for you when I reflect that back.
Well, I think that's a really beautiful thing around old narrative and new narrative, because the grittiness was required of me to survive in somebody else's infrastructure, right? You hustle underneath someone else's vision, mission, vision, values, and you sort of are striving and doing. There is that loss of self, there is a hardening. And in order for me, I don't know about other people, but in order for me to survive that, I did have to kind of get hard. And that goes away. The structure goes away. These comical events, all of these conditioned things happen around my kids and my life, and that I recognize that this tender version of me no longer fits in that. Um, maybe it will fit somewhere. I don't know. I don't really at this point in my life have any desire to go back under an infrastructure. I don't really want to lose myself. I don't think I've totally found myself at all, but I feel like I'm coming out more than I want to go in.
Sure. So I guess then the question
um,
would be, if you had the option to create the business that you wanted, having all of the tenderness and like more human qualities that you had to kind of nurture through like the story with your child and all of that, would that be something you would like?
absolutely.
Okay. So I think that's also the distinction now, is like, now here's another opportunity and another trigger where I get to set my own standards, right? The
Mhm.
standards of success and how I show up are going to be ones nurtured through tenderness, humanness,
Mhm.
emotion, like whatever words resonate with you. It's not going to be the grit that I had to
Yeah.
meet in the standards of the structure from before.
Yeah. That feels very true to the person that I am learning to be.
Absolutely. So I agree with you on that. And then, so now we have kind of like, those are the two main ones, right? Like this whole aspect of the self-doubt comes from the removal of the structure, right? The tenderness comes from, well, that's kind of like the nakedness piece, right? Like now it
Yeah.
is left for me. I know fundamentally is what I want. I don't know how to go out into the world with showing and leading with my tenderness, right? And subsequently making a business out of that. I think what you're going to find in the future as well is when that gets threatened with rejection, you're going to want to pull back to
Mm.
the hardness, right? And
Mm.
in my experience, it's not necessary, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can still continue to lead, but it's going to be a matter of nurturing that tenderness to be
Mhm.
powerful enough to stand in the actual reality of rejection, which you're going to have to face.
Mhm.
Okay. And then there's all these other aspects of the safe and insulated referral community. Right. So, and again, you can let me know what resonates with you or not, but what I'm hearing when you speak about that is like, I've extracted everything that I can out of the safety of all of these people that I know that have said yes to me, i.e. another safety structure.
Mhm.
Now there's nothing left. So now, again, I have to go out into the world if I want the business to grow, if I want to thrive, not survive. So there's more stories that need to be addressed there as far as, what does it mean for me to go out and search for people? What does it mean for me to show up in tenderness? What does it mean for me to not have to rely on, referrals and have to talk to strangers and be rejected? So kind of connect back to the other elements. So how does that one resonate with you?
I mean, it's like, yeah, just that the sort of referral community is just another safety structure. I mean, that's it, right? Like, I have built this beautiful community of people who sort of feed that part of my ego, that keep me safe, right? That don't ask me to sort of stretch beyond that. And I can feel in my business, in launching new products or doing new things, I can feel like, well, I guess it's just not for me, because I won't step outside of that safety structure and go, well, what would it be like if there was another structure out here I don't even know that exists?
Correct. And actually, I think that's a beautiful segue to the last point that I've written down here. It's like you had the sentiment of like, I'm not good enough. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And what you just said was like, literally, if I go beyond the referral structures and kind of they say no, or I can't remember the exact words that you used, but it was something along the lines of like, if they don't acknowledge me, if the externals don't acknowledge me,
Mm-hmm.
then it must mean that I'm the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So really this whole thing, like if you were to look at one summation, right, like you have about 4 or 5 different mindset things that have come out, but they're all really circling around patterns, narratives, or in some instances, habits as well, with regards to what you say no to and what you say yes to, around I'm not good enough, right? Because if I was fundamentally good enough, I could show up in my tenderness. I could set and work to meet my own standards. I could go outside my referral community and, look for work. I could face rejection and be okay with that. I could then be visible, right? It all kind of circles centrally around that one theme. So what lands for you when I reflect that back?
I mean, it feels like it tracks, right? It feels like it sort of connects. And I wouldn't have, and I think that's probably why it's hidden, right? The idea around not that I am not good enough, where I will use my smarts to compensate for feeling smart enough or capable enough, which is still just hiding that I don't feel good enough.
100%. And I've said it on the podcast many times. It's like where our primary strength becomes our first distortion. So obviously, intellectual capacity is going to be a primary strength for you, but it is going to be the first thing you use to distort any problem that comes into it, right? Because the real problem here is a feeling problem. Fundamentally, I don't feel safe executing on the business things I know I need to execute on. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go all in on my primary strength, which ends up actually distorting what the real issue is. So I'm going to do a lot of work that doesn't really lead anywhere. I'm going to go into more schooling so that I can be hoping to find good enough somewhere there, right? I'm going to perpetuate all the stories in my head and elaborate and self-analyze. Again, your self-awareness is really keen, but I'm never going to actually create the process or have a process to actually face the embodied parts that are really holding me back from executing on the actions that are ultimately going to resolve the business issues.
Right.
So how does all of that land for you?
I mean, yeah, it feels the clearest I've been around the source of my pain in a long time.
Awesome. So then if we were to just again zoom out, what would it mean to you to resolve all of this?
I mean, the thing that just washes over me is just like peace or sorry, my pup.
That's okay.
he can tell I'm agitated.
I was gonna say he feels
Yeah,
that there's something that
yeah.
needs supporting. Yes.
He's like, will you please just be okay, mom? It feels like relief. It feels like sort of really that beautiful present moment of, I have what I need. It's all here. It's all good. That the sort of rest from the yearning, I guess.
Got it. And that seems like that's what it would mean on the personal side of things to resolve all of this. What would it mean on the business side of things?
Um, I'd have to believe that I'd make a bigger impact because I wouldn't be getting in my way as much, and would, sort of lead with more of that boldness and belief around that, if this isn't a good fit for you, it's a good fit for somebody. Um, and so I think that my impact would grow.
100%. And if you took that one step further and actually practice the boldness to verbalize like a vision of what your business would look like, what might that be?
I don't think I've ever dared to do that. So
Well, here's your
if I,
opportunity right
I
now.
know, I was like, okay, so if I'm going to just do this off the cuff, what would that be? And I honestly, I can't quantify it because I've never done that. And so that is definitely homework I'm going to take, because I'm sad for myself that I can't dream. I haven't let myself dream like that. I want it to be more than enough, right? Like I definitely am not trying to take over the world by any stretch of the imagination, but I would like to have an ease in our life that doesn't look like filling up all of my time. Having more balance for family and my animals and my life, while still being able to take care of the things that I want to take care of. And so it feels like enough, but it feels like a different kind of enough, not like the survive enough, but like, I think your words, like the thrive enough.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was picking up as well. And I think that's a beautiful spot to be in. So you had mentioned a bunch of things that kind of you would do that I guess you're not really doing right now as far as like the capacity issue. So what kinds of things would you be able to do that you're not really doing right now?
I think, more, I mean, some silly stuff, right? But I would walk my dog more. I would want, I mean, clearly he needs it. He's bugging the life out of me right now. He's a sneaky little guy. But that was the point in us adding a dog to our family, was to enjoy him and to be outside. And my kids are only little ones, and so to be able to have clear time boundaries. I mean, I have sort of hard stops, but do it earlier. So that there's a little more fun and joy and not just so much like moving between life. I think I would just spend my time less on work and more on life.
100%. I think that's a beautiful vision. And just one thing I would want to like highlight for you is you started that whole thing saying, oh, with this like silly thing, like it's silly for me to want to spend time with my dog. It's silly for me to want to spend time with my kids, right? When the reality is that is the essence of why you want to move into having your own business. Like the freedom that you can create from that is exactly what we just described. But you see how your brain is still so rooted in the whole, I'm not good enough, I don't know if I'm allowed to do that, where it's discounting the beauty of the vision by actually saying this seemingly innocent thing of like it's silly, when the reality is actually life, like that is the part that gives you life. Right. So
Yeah.
I just want to point that out to allow yourself to really embrace the possibilities that somebody with your expertise ultimately has to create that, right? Because
Mhm.
it's probably a much shorter path for you than you are allowing yourself to see and or accept, because of the experience that you have, because of the expertise that you have.
Mhm.
That vision, I think fundamentally, just from the outside looking in, is actually closer to you than you're actually allowing yourself to see or even give yourself permission for.
Yeah, I mean, it's like right here.
Yeah, it's literally on screen. Yeah, as we speak. I 100% agree with you. So in that case, I know we kind of gone through a lot. Obviously, we can't solve all of these issues, in one podcast episode. But does all of that feel complete for you, or is there still something left outstanding?
No, it feels really, really complete and really clear and possible, really.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. So why don't you then just sum it up in your own words, kind of like, where were you when you came into this episode? And then what are some key takeaways or highlights or lessons that you got out of it?
Well, I started really dancing around, like feeling like I was too tender of a person, or that was like not possible to sort of manage, and sort of the doubt and the recognition around how much I thrive in structure, whether that was doing well in school, still doing well in school, the corporate environment that I worked in for 17 years, all of that. And that just leaving that structure, I've just found ways to enable it really in my life right now, whether that's the PhD program or my referral network or whatever I'm doing. I'm sort of keeping myself confined to other people's cages, really, without recognizing. And the rumbling that I've been doing between oscillating between being gritty and being tender, feeling like that's the way that you survive in the world is by being gritty, and I'm not wanting to give that back up or going backwards. And in reality, all of that is just protecting, and my competence too, my knowledge, my expertise is all just protecting this really soft part of me that doesn't feel like I'm good enough. And that you're right. That's a feeling problem, not a thinking problem. I don't have thinking problems.
Yeah, you're very good at solving thinking problems. Correct.
And so I do know what tools look like for me to focus on a feeling problem. And that doing that might open doorways to the kind of life that I'm really interested in leading.
Love it. Well, I think that is as good a summary as any with regards to what we went through today. So, Erin, thank you very much for coming on to the podcast. And then if you can just close us off, let everybody know where they can find you, what's the best place, who's the best person to find you. Floor is yours for all that.
Well, thank you. I am over at livingtheenneagram.com and have an Instagram page called Living the Enneagram, and ultimately just a place to practice and reflect. So I'd love for you to join me there.
Awesome. We'll include all of that in the show notes. So, Erin, thank you very much for coming on. And for everybody else, we'll see you on the next one.